Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Low Code Cafe. This is Wednesday, October 26, 2022, episode number 114. Today, we're going to talk some about importing data. It's not going to be it's going to be an introduction to the topic, not an advanced one at all. But if you need to import some data, we'll deal with that. But first, before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plantain App. I'm joined today by Patrick Anderson, who's a technical success manager here at Plantain App. We are going to be talking about importing data, but we're also going to be talking about some hotfixes that are available in our product. Just by way of introduction, again, this is an event we do every Wednesday, this same hour. It's a weekly event that is for our community. We do updates, we do demos, we do hands-on coding, and that's normally the largest part of what we do. All of our prior episodes are on YouTube at youtube.com/plantainapp. We encourage you to sign up, subscribe, and set for notifications so that you can see when we post new content. Our agenda today, pretty short. We're going to do this introduction and cover our From the Trenches segment, which is all about things that come up in support. And then we'll get right on into our hands-on low-code development. Feel free to interact with us in any way you see fit. You can use the chat window or the question and answer window here in Zoom. And then also feel free to raise your hand if you would like to speak, or use our feedback form after the event. So from the trenches, we'll talk briefly about some hotfixes. For our current version is 1.22. We have previously released 17 hotfixes. This week, there are 6 more, and they fall into these 3 categories: forms, listing, and general. In forms, there are a variety of validators that you can use to determine whether your input is good. For example, if it's numeric or looking like a US phone number, there's a variety of them available. We've added another of them, the CNP, or personal numeric personal code. This is a validator that is, I know, applies to our Romanian customers, and so that might be of value if you're trying to collect a CNP. So that's now part of our product, and you can add it by way of a hotfix, the updates hotfixes page. We made some changes. This is just kind of an ongoing effort. We made some changes to our inline help text for our import, so it doesn't change any functionality. Import list into database, just to correct and make that inline help as valuable as we can. And then there was an update that we posted last week, and we posted again today. The generate PDF action was failing to create the file. We fixed the problem last week, but our installer was bad, and so you couldn't install it through the interface. So we fixed that and released it again. Within listings, there was an issue with when you selected items to be processed, and if you had a root button that showed the number of items to be processed, and then it wasn't refreshing when the refresh listing action was done, so we've corrected that. From a general perspective, and this is probably one that we know has impacted a number of users, we fixed there's an iService provider intermittent error that you might see in the log. It really showed up in a variety of ways, but if you're seeing iService provider errors in the log, this one will fix that. And then internally, when we use for the page builder theme, now it defaults to using a Bootstrap 5 layout instead of Bootstrap 3. So not all of those will impact all of you, but if you're waiting for something, you're welcome to install those. If a hotfix applies to you, you're encouraged to install it. Those are done and tested through our QA department, and we'll solve those individual issues for you. I encourage you to join us on Campfire, another event we hold weekly, the same hour on Fridays. This week, we will probably continue our import discussion a little bit. Again, the import we're going to do today is an introduction to the topic, and I know we have people that regularly engage in Campfire that do far more involved imports. So if you have a question about a particular import you want to accomplish, or if you want to hear about some more advanced use cases, this would be a great place to do that. But also just it's a conversation, so there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions or to learn from your Plantain app peers. I will put the links for this episode on our site, on the chat. That includes our normal links, which are the you can register for the low-code Campfire in advance. You can get to our webinar recordings on YouTube. We encourage you to use the community portal to ask questions and learn things and submit your feature request, but it's also an opportunity to get to our live help. So community portal, very valuable. And then our webinar feedback form, give us feedback and we'll incorporate that into future episodes. Today, we're going to be talking about the National Address Database, so the link for that is on there as well. So without further ado, we'll move into our hands-on low coding segment and talk about importing some text data. Our goal today, we're going to create and populate an entity in Plantain app that uses a given CSV data set. We'll do some manipulation with that, but the example database that I chose, one I discovered over the course of the last week, it's the US National Address Database. So before we dive into the example, let's talk about scenarios for why you might want to import. It could be that you want to create a reference entity, and that's the case we're going to cover today, creating an address database that you can use to populate a drop-down so that people pick from this reference database. Another import case might be transactional data, where you get a list of services performed from some other system and you want to invoice for them, some kind of transactional data that you're going to process. And so it might then be something that you do instead of a one-time import like a reference entity. It might be something that you build to import on an ongoing basis. So that would be another type of import. And then another another one would be if you were doing a migration to a new system. You've built a new Plantain app system. You've got an old system that has some good data that you want to move. And so migrating that data, you're going to have to export from one and import to another and finding some way to do that. So this could have, this importing that we're going to talk about today could certainly apply in all those scenarios. There's probably a lot more scenarios for importing. But let's drop away from our presentation here and get into a little hands-on. So the National Address Database, I'm going to show you something about where we're going today. This is a proof of concept. I've already loaded the data into a database here, and so it has columns like the state, the county, the zip code. By the way, none of this information is proprietary or personal. It only has addresses, and address type information doesn't have any name information that's associated with it. So, but it does have latitude and longitude, and that was pretty key to what I wanted to accomplish in this particular site that I imported this into. The ability to map out addresses and to know the addresses that exist, and I guess highly important, find this information and not have to pay for it. So within, I mean, we can explore this data just a little bit. It has things like a street name redirection. So north, south, east, west are the kinds of values that are there, and we could filter for that. Let's see if my site needs to be refreshed here. So yeah, north, we see it has values like North Kaufman Road, there are other things called like the pre-type. It's what type of road is it? We have county roads and farm to market roads here in Texas. We could sort by state. So I've got several different states loaded in here in this example, or county. So this is just the data that comes in and kind of shows them, didn't mean to add, shows a nice how you can use the filtering of a Plantain app to get to the individual rows that you want to. I live on St. Orland Way type. And so, for example, you can filter in and see all the address numbers that are on a particular street. So, National Address Database. So this is the target. We're going to load up something like this, and we're going to download the data, do some manipulation with it, and get it into an entity within Plantain app. Okay, that's our target. So let's dive in on that. Again, if there's questions along the way or comments from my co-host here, please jump in. So the overview of an import project could be, and by the way, every import project is different. It's kind of like when I talked about security to an API. Everyone is a little bit different, but these kinds of steps will be common. So you're going to have to acquire and understand the data that you're going to get. Maybe you're going to do some pre-import processing. Maybe we'll talk about that. There's within Plantain app, you're going to have a home for it. So we're going to create an entity to hold the data, some kind of an import form or process that's going to load your data and bring your data in from the file and put it out to the entity. So we'll import the data. And then finally, how are you going to use the data in your application? So those are some kind of simple common steps, and that's the flow that we're going to follow today. So first, let's talk about the National Address Database. I had started out, the problem that I was trying to solve was to get all of the addresses in my home county of Kaufman, Texas. And I started out by going to the assessor's office, which offered a nice free database, and I loaded up and played with it quite a bit, and using the same kind of steps that we're going to talk about today. And I found, after looking at it, that the data was not really what I wanted. It didn't have consistency or quality, because the assessor's office is more about collecting taxes than it is about providing good addresses. It also didn't have latitude and longitude, which I was going to get around by asking Google and paying Google to give me that information. But even that didn't work out very well, because the addresses that the county had on file didn't match up well with what when you try to geocode them through Google, they didn't match up enough to reliably give a result. So I was getting about a 10% error rate. So I went on a hunt and took a look for other address databases, and came across the National Address Database, which is put out by the U.S. Department of Transportation. And it's built around the need for transportation safety and mail delivery and things like that. And so there's it's a great database. It has a lot of participation. Their map shows, for example, that Texas is participating 100%, but some places less so. So this is localities are contributing addresses into a common format. And again, it's free. So that was interesting. So I dug down into it, took a little look. They have a schema here that says what is the layout of this thing. And so I took a look at that, and it showed me the fields that were going to be available, state and county, and for example, that they're always used. And then I got down here to latitude and longitude, and it was always used. And so I said, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. It had address information, doesn't have people, but I don't care about people. That quote is probably going to get pulled out right now. I didn't care about this purpose. But we needed that latitude and longitude and address. There's a lot of extra stuff here that I didn't need, but it had the minimum of what I did need, so I was ready to move forward. So with that, I did the download page and found the download links, and I experimented around a little bit here. There's this is released in a geodatabase format, which is associated with a particular program, which I don't know, maybe free, maybe paid. But there is also this comma delimited ASCII, and that's what I downloaded, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So I've already downloaded that. I just clicked the link and it downloaded the ASCII, and it gave me a folder. I pulled out just the relevant. There was other data in this folder. I pulled out what was relevant to me here, and we just put it so we can take a look at it. The main file is that was this ASCII file was the National Address Database revision 11, and it's a text file, and it was 18 gigabytes big. And realizing that I only wanted a subset of that, I knew that immediately that I had a problem. How do I get just the records that I want and out of that database? And then for today's purposes, I've already filtered it down to a Texas list, so we don't have to sit and wait for it to process and do a filtering. But so this already is a pre-filtered list, and it's just a kind of shortcut for today. Anyway, let's see where we are in our process. That's the National Address Database. We've talked a little bit about the schema, and we've downloaded the data, and now it's time to explore it a little bit and figure out what you're going to do with it. Oftentimes you get data from some data source, it's not under your control, and so you've got to explore, is the data any good, or is there too much of it? Does it need to be transformed? Are there duplicates? And we're going to address the first two today. We're going to filter and transform a little bit, but deduplication is a whole topic of its own, where you have to figure out what, if there's extra data, extra rows in the data, and how you're going to merge them or filter them out or things like that. We're kind of still in this explore the data a little bit. You haven't seen the data, so I'm going to open this up. This first one will open up, and could you make a note, please, Patrick, to do a little filtering? I'm going to have to blur that last screen because I didn't intend to show it.
Okay.
This is, I've opened up the data. The 2 gigabyte filtered out Texas database was enough to, is small enough that I can just simply open it in an editor without too long a delay. So that's part of why I filtered it down. The 17 gig one will open, but with multi-minute consequences to opening the database. So it comes with a header. It's a common delimited file. So you've got all our column names up at the top, and then we have data with common delimited data that follows. So it's got this thing called an OID, and then a state, a county, and you can kind of pick out the data that's there, latitude and longitude. So we have our data, and but this is all of Texas, and I only want one county. So if we go looking, there's 991,000 records in Texas, and I did not want to load data that I don't need into Plantanak. It adds a whole level of complexity in terms of how to get the data loaded and in, and I didn't need it. So filtering it out was kind of my first problem. How do I filter it out? There's lots of ways that you can filter out data. You can build a program or find a utility. For kind of this one-off purpose, I decided to use an old DOS utility called FindString, and I've already built a command line to do that. But let's not short circuit the process. I'm going to grab this your path folder so that we can take a look at the utility itself.
And Dale, while you're doing that, just an idea that I'll toss in is that I've worked with a client who does this kind of thing for a repeatable import. They do processing. They download a file and do processing of a file, and they do all that with a run PowerShell script action. So this is all automated. So this is something that with PowerShell you could have that repeats on a regular basis.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So again, I was going for cheap or free here. Not and I'm sorry, in my case, just talking about the filtering that I want to use, that I'm using fine string. And I think that's the syntax. So fine string, the old DOS command that lets you process a file, pulls out the things that matches. We can specify case insensitivity so that we don't have to worry about case. And then you can use the old DOS piping to pull out pull the thing into a new file. And so that's the technique that I chose to use for this one. So I'm really looking for, if you look again at the data, it begins with Texas, or it has the state, and then it has the county. So it was going to be really easy for me to pull out the county that I wanted. And so this was the fine string that I came up with to get that done. So what I'm doing is a fine string with case insensitivity, looking for comma Texas Kaufman. So that's the county I care about. I have an input file of this Texas file, Texas text file. And then this operator here, greater than in DOS, lets you send the output of fine string to another file. And so now we're going to have this file called nad whatever filtered. And so I am going to save this and run it. And hopefully we'll get our filtered result. So it runs. I also added a more command at the bottom, which is an old DOS command to have it stop, or excuse me, a pause command to have it stop so that we can see that it didn't have any errors. And so it did that, and here we go. So now we have a filtered data set. And if we open that up, we see that now we just have records that begin with Texas Kaufman from top to bottom, and now there's only 72,000 instead of almost 1 million. So that's far more workable. One thing though that happened is that header that was at the top of the file that tells the column names got lost because that didn't hit the filtering that I did. So I'm going to go back and just grab that and add it to the top here manually. And so that's going to take care of us so that we know what our column names are. Save that. Great. So I'll keep this this file open here a little bit just in case we want to refer to it. But we now have this filtered file that we can work with. Great. So let's stick with our presentation. Does it need filtering, transformation, deduplication? I'm going to peek ahead here. Yep. So filtering, we did filtering using the fine string, and we preserved the header row. And now maybe we want to do some transformation. And in my case, I just want to explore the data a little bit. Maybe we remove some unnecessarily, some unnecessary columns. But you can pick a tool of choice, whether you want to run some kind of a BB or Razor or whatever your tool of choice is to do some transformation. But I wanted to, or even Access, you can load the data into Access, whatever your tool of choice is. So I am going to go in here and I am going to open, again, I'm going to grab this path and I'm going to open Excel just to load the data in there and get a look at it. So I am going to open to browse here. Pick a text file. Where is that? We'll go with all files so I can find it. There it is. Come up with our dialog, which is delimited. It has headers. The delimiting is a comma. And so we'll do that and finish that off. So now we can see the same data in Excel. So one possibility here is that we could find, if there's columns, we can explore these columns, right? Go to top to bottom and see if there's any data, and if there's no data in that column at all. It didn't stop when I did a control up arrow, control down arrow, didn't stop, so there's no values in that column. Potentially I could just delete the column out if it has no data and I don't need it. And again, it gives us an opportunity to explore the data. If we haven't seen it before, we can see whether or not there's data in a column and what we want to do with it. I am going to take the approach where I'm actually not going to transform this. I'm just going to save this as an Excel and we'll move on to doing the import. What we will do though is that we'll just pick out columns, that certain columns that we want to keep, like address number and the street, these street name fields, and we'll import them and we'll ignore the rest of them through the import. One reason that you might want to transform this and remove data is if it might be too big, if or slow down the import. If there's just a bunch of data that you're not going to need, you can pull out just the columns that you need, but it's not going to slow us down, I think, enough to worry about. So we'll file save as this and send it as an Excel file to the same folder. And so we'll save that and close out. So now we have a filtered Excel file. We could have used the text file. It's real easy to import using an Excel file, and so that's why I'm going in that direction. I'm going to make sure my other system stays alive here so I can have a little guide on where we're going. Okay, so we've talked about doing some transformation and maybe removing unnecessary columns, but now we're ready to move on. So we're going to create the entity for whatever it is that we're going to keep. The column, let's go. We're going to do this in our Campfire database. For those of you who participate in Campfire, you would have access to this and be able to take a look at what we actually create here today. And to get access, you just need to participate in Campfire on our Fridays this same hour. So come join and do that. I'm going to go into our Plantain app configuration and open up an entity, create an entity to do this. We'll just call this, we'll put this into the sample database. So we'll create a new entity in the sample namespace, and it doesn't matter which one we pick, but I'm picking sample, and we're going to create an entity called NAD, with the plural of NADs. That stands for National Address Database. Spelled it out if we wanted to. I am going to display this in the menu, and I'm going to put it in a search for the page. I have a page of my contributions, and I'm just going to put it in my 2022 contributions. And I'm going to put this at the top of the list there. So it'll be easy to find. And so now we get into what columns are we going to do. We get the default ones provided by Plantain app, and we just need to specify the rest of them. We can grab the columns from anywhere. I've got them. We could use this list, I suppose. And so I'm going to put them into a new list and pick out which ones. So I don't really care about OID. I will get state, we'll get county. We've already established this one. A lot of these we don't care about. I am really interested in street information. So we're going to keep the street name ones. Both the pre and post street. They've done quite a job of splitting this information out. We'll need the address number, but then, if there's an additional address number, we'll probably grab that, the suffix, and then there's a bunch of things I don't care about again, landmarks, floors, buildings, rooms, and you just have to decide what you care about in your database. But we'll also get, this was what I really cared about, latitude and longitude. And then they had their GUID. I'll keep their GUID so that if I want to match on this at some later time and add data, I could. There was some address type was kind of interesting, so I'm going to keep that. I don't care where it really came from. So the source. They had some dates here, and that doesn't really apply to what I want to do. So we'll kind of keep the number of fields limited to what we think we might use. And so now these are the fields we want to keep. I'm going to use the same names in Plantanet. Apologize for having to go back and forth here, but I like copy paste. But we'll use the same fields that they have the exact same names, and that keeps it easy for us. So we have state, county, this free modifier. This is part of the tedious part of imports. If you're watching on video after the fact, you should just skip forward 2 minutes. If you're live, you might want to get a cup of coffee. Patrick, do we have any questions on?
I just checked. No questions. If anybody has any questions, this is a great time to type one in.
All right, that was easy. There's going to be another one of these coming up in a minute, so you'll have another chance to get a coffee then. We have to pick one of these to be a display name, and I'm going to arbitrarily pick the address number as the display name. It doesn't really matter. We have to pick one, and this is the one that gets automatically hyperlinked to dive down into the detail record. So we'll pick address number. It doesn't really matter in this particular case. And then we have all of our properties or attributes of the property, whether or not it's required, searchable, filterable, and we could spend some good time thinking about this. But for simplicity, I'm going to make everything sortable when we get into looking at this data. This will give us the ability to take a look at it and manipulate it as we need. And then a few of them being filterable. Again, we might yet come back to, we'll make all of them searchable as well. That's useful. These aren't final decisions. You can, when you're exploring the data, perhaps you come back and decide that you want to make something filterable because you see the data and see it might be useful. But for my purposes, I am going to make the street name filterable. And then we'll just stop with that. So that gives us a database that we can put things into. And so we'll save that. So moving on, so we did create entity, the recommendation. I use the exact column names from the import so that it makes my life easier as we move forward in the process. If you needed different column names, you can do that. And then you just have to do a little transposition when you're building the file. So now we're finally down to the Plantinap part of this today is how to build something to do an import. We're going to have a page that's for that form. It's we're going to do this by way of a form. So the form gives us the ability to upload the file and to process the file with some actions, and it's really quite a simple process. But we'll start with pages. Switch to a deep look here, but we're looking for the contribution page. You got to find that same page where I just put that, and we'll put a page underneath it. So under our 2022, we have the national address databases. And so underneath that, which was already created, I'm just going to create a page to do an import. So we'll do a new page, and it's going to be the import page. This is only going to be used by, not all users, admins, nobody. This is just something to keep people who don't belong here away. So it's going to be kind of a hidden one. And we can go directly to that page using this icon here. So we've created a page where we're going to put our import. Let's take a look too at what was built for us automatically. Again, Plantinap always creates a listing of the thing of the entity, and it has a new button. So we could manually enter a NAD record here, and not that makes sense in this scenario, but it's built. And when we have some, they'll have edit and delete capability. The street name that we picked out is here ready to filter. So we've got an empty database, empty forms and listings, just waiting for some data. So we're going to go on to our importer, build and import. So here we go. We've added a page for the form. We'll go on and add a form and to create this single file upload control. So keep track of where I am here. Here's our importer. We are going to add it. Import page, we'll add import to it. Add form to do it. So we will add a module that is an action form, and we'll add it to the page. I've got this extra text that I don't need. I'm going to delete it out. That just happens when we create the page. So here we go. We've got a form, and we're going to manage it. We're going to choose to start with a blank form, and then we'll add stuff to it. So our form is going to be the add import form, and we'll name it because we like to name things. And the field type that we want to add is a single file upload. So this is going to provide a chooser for us. So this is going to be something like the NAD file, and it's going to create an ID called NAD file. The pattern that we want, the file type that we want to expect, for example, is an XLSX file. So we'll do that. We're going to put this the file has to go somewhere, and I'm not going to keep it, so I'm just going to put it into a temp. And if we got a file by the same name, we don't care, so we'll actually overwrite the file if it comes up again. And yep, that's it. So this gets us our file, and it's going to be called NAD file. So we'll be able to, once it loads, process it. Let's just show you where we are then so far. We go back and take a look at this. This page didn't come in Bootstrap 5, and that's just the nature of that website not having the correct default. So we're going to say that the website will serve up a Bootstrap 5 type container. Page theme. So now hopefully this will look great. Okay, here we go. So now what we got is this NAD file, and we can choose a file there. And then after we get a file, we'll go ahead and create a button to process it. So that'll be our next step. So we'll continue to modify our NAD input form. We'll have a button. The button is going to be import. And what is it going to do? The actions that this is that we want this to take is to create a list. Part of our list and objects. We want to create a list from an Excel document. So when you create a list, this gives you something that you can iterate through. You can step through it and process each record individually. So the list that we want to process is going to be our NAD file. The list name that we're creating is called NAD list, but the file path that we want to input is called NAD file. So this is the name of this of the property up above, the single file uploader. And so it was provided there for us automatically. So that's the one that we want to load in. We're going to output it. So this is the input, this is the output, and then we want to include all fields in what gets processed. We're not going to be very selective at this point. All fields that are in that file are going to happen. We're going to use the first row as the column names, and that's good because that's the way the file is laid out. And we need a sheet name that's being processed. And so if we go back to our Excel file here and open it up, we can see what it says. The sheet file is the sheet name is this, so I'm just going to copy it and so we'll use that as the sheet name. We're going to start at the beginning and end. No, here's a good one. Where to end after we're reading. We could specify that we only want to do a small number of rows so that we can speed up the process. I'm going to use a different way to do that. I'm going to test with a small record set, but so that we know that we've got a good result before we process all 70,000 records. So this gives us an output called a NAD list, and this is where we're going to process the NAD list. There is a action called execute actions for each list entry. So the set of actions that we give it will repeat once for each item in the NAD list. And the action that we want to do is a create new NAD. This action was created for us automatically when we did the entity, and it has all our properties that we want to provide. So the prefix, every record is going to be presented to this action list, and it's going to be in the format of a context token that looks something like this. And for each one of these, we'll put in, for example, state. So we're going to take what comes in the NAD list state column and make it be a state. We're going to do that for all of these, and this is where I said that you're going to have a second opportunity to get some coffee. And where did I go? So we're going to fill in the blank on all of these. It's going to take me a minute. But I'm able to copy and paste because I kept the column names in our entity the same as the column names in our import. And this is why I picked out some and threw some away. I'll have only made it longer to import all of the fields. If you have an actual database, maybe you will want to import all the fields just in case you want to use them at a future time. That wasn't too bad. So this is, again, a create new NAD action. It's going to run once for each item in the NAD list, and going to create records for us. So we will save this, and I'm going to flip back here for just a second, and I have this filtered list that I'm working with in Excel. And I'm going to delete out a bunch of records, right? I'm going to delete out most of them and save this as a small copy. So we'll do a file, save as, and add filtered short, so that we can just import with 10 records, see if we get what we think we're going to get, and then take the time to do all of them. So we've got a small file. We have our importer ready to go. We'll pick that folder name here and paste it so that I can pick my short list. And so we get our file chosen here. We'll do the import and see if it works. So it worked without complaining and went very fast. So now let's go back up to our NADS page and take a look. And there we go. We have 10 records. We make sure things got where they belong. So Kaufman, scroll a little bit here to see latitude, longitude, GUID. So we have the fields that look about right. This leaves us with one small problem. We need to clear this table before we import, so we don't have duplicate records. These 10 worked, and so I am going to go back and use build a little query to do that. This exactly is why you don't give access to the SQL console for your general users, because with one statement we can delete all the records out. And I am going to copy that. I'm not actually going to run it here. I'm going to go back to my import and add an action to do this so that we can do it as many times as we need to. So I go to our NAD input form, import form. In our actions, I'm going to add a SQL, run SQL query that is delete there, we'll do it above. So this assures us that it's empty each time we do it. So for example, if we do the process on the short list again, and take a look at it, we still will only have 10 records, but the numbering starts in a higher spot here. So this gives us the ability to run our test over and over again until we get it right. We got it right the first time, but this lets us do that. So now we can run and import all of our records. So I'm going to take the filtered XLS without the short version here and process it. And so here we're going to do 70,000 records. This is exciting. Take again now. Any time for questions. Things that I didn't do in the middle of this process, and probably could have been a very good thing to do. All of this data is spread out in a way that is a little bit hard to use. That, for example, the street name is broken out into all its individual components, and when we use it, we might want a field that has them all concatenated together so that somebody can type an address in something much like a standard address might be, so a street number and a street, and have it search for it that way. So we could have built a formatted address field, and during the import add a step so that as it's looping through the list, that it would build the composite field and then store it in the database ready to go. That way we get our individual information and each individual field and maybe the composite field. You may also, in your scenario, have to maybe you would have a derived field, or you might look up additional data from external tables. And so there would be a need to do some intermediate processing. It could be done on the fly in the import. You just do it for each record. Another case would be to take another way to do that would be after you import the data to build a workflow or some other process that would do that processing.
Dale, Albert's asking if there's a way we could add or update, delete record. Yeah, so add, update, or delete records. I guess based on maybe the GUID you have, so that you don't have to purge the table each time.
And there, I believe, well, so going the direction that I have programmatically, yes, you could do that. And we also have other, we're doing this today through the import. We want the import to go directly to an entity. There is another mechanism. Another possibility to do this would be to do it through a SQL table, and we have some other actions imported to database that natively do that kind of work. Do I have that right, Patrick? I don't think those will work with entities. But if you wanted to go with a native SQL table, is that?
Yeah, that sounds like a possibility. Yeah.
I think those actions are called database actions. We can take a look at.
And well, I mean, even using the method you're using here, it seems like that you could potentially, it would be more complicated, definitely, but use your GUID to check if the record exists, something along those lines. So
right, to do some branching within the actions. I just wanted to point out that there are some database actions, and if you search for database in the action list, you'll find some that can also be used that kind of do that stuff natively. So there's some other answers that there's a couple of different directions that you can go there. I hope that answers the question. All right, so and yeah, going back from the start, I said I'm going to do a very simple case, and so that's why I went with the delete methodology, and obviously that's not going to hold up in lots of cases. So we added the ability to sort this, and so I'm sorting it now descending, and so we see we have more than 72,000 or record IDs up into the 72,000. So that kind of aligns with the number of records we expected to get. We have our data that we can search for, and for example, we also have our filtering was available on street names. So this would be, for example, going back to my St. Orlan, we have our address numbers here, all the different houses on my street. So we kind of hit our first target. We got our database in, and this is one way to accomplish that. So yeah, during the import, we did this. I didn't point it out, but we at least on the slide, you might want to consider running it on a subset of data. Imports are notoriously take many iterations, and so processing, if you're dealing with 100,000 records and you make a mistake, then you're spending 5 minutes watching it do nothing. So running it on a small set or representative sample is a good idea, and then always import, test, review, do it again. So that's kind of the next thing. So we're kind of down to how could we use this in an application, and I'm going to try and do that in the we've got 3 minutes. That's exciting. And so in the interest of time, I'm just going to do it in the same form that we already had. I am going to take advantage of the SQL query builder to build something that might be useful. So I am going to select from the app add table. This is just do that. Select from app-nad, and I want to select things like the address number, which this is letting me copy and paste here. That's the address number prefix. The address number itself. So I'm doing this just to kind of build up a potential SQL that will give us something we can use. And so let's see, the street name is in here somewhere. Oh, yeah. So again, this is just very quick and rough. And then I'm also going to grab the ID. So we'll get two different fields, and the address in a visual way, and the address as an ID, the unique ID of the record. And so I'm going to use this query to develop a quick import form. So again, I'm a quick, data entry form. I'm going to use this same form. It really doesn't make sense except just as an example, but we'll add a field that is going to be a single choice drop down with autocomplete. And this is, we're going to call it address. The item data source is going to be a SQL query. And the SQL query is this thing that I just created. So this is going to give us a very simple documentation of how this could be used. And I think that's all I need to do this. Let's try and take a look. So yeah, we have I could have sorted it, but we have an address field, and we can start typing and it will fill in and give us the data. So this gives us a way to input the data, get an ID. Now that we have that ID, we can save it in the record, and then consume that latitude and longitude that was the point of the whole story to start with.
Which reminds me a bit of when you go do a tax record search and you first put in a street name, and then it offers you a list of addresses from that street. That's something you could do with this.
Absolutely, and we could take off that restriction, and actually, now I'm kind of interested in what the performance would be, because I think the performance would be great. I'm going to stretch us out here for just a second. If we don't do this, so this is going to get all of our 77,000 addresses, but I think this tool is built to take that and yeah, it took a second. So yeah, we can Clover Lane, which is nearby here, and we have all of our street. And so there's a great deal of power behind that kind of import. Great. Definitely. All right. Thanks for hanging on with us for an import today. I hope that if you have follow-ups, we would love to talk to you about it in the low code campfire coming up on Friday. But in the meantime, happy low coding.